This is Alice Mercer, and I'm here doing another explainer on some of the conflicts in labor relations between my employer, Sacramento City Unified School District, and my union, Sacramento City Teachers Association. So, you may have heard that there have been requests for round-the-clock negotiations, and that started with the district. Basically saying that they wanted to go over and start discussing opening our contract. So I'm just going to give some quick background. This is the original letter that went over out on August 2nd. That's like the latest round of letters. That's the first of the latest round of letters that have gone out from the district over on this. So basically, our last contract was finalized in November of 2017. There were three main parts to it. The first was a salary increase, and that came along fairly in a fairly orderly manner. The second part was we restructured our salary structure agreement. And that was because we were losing teachers over in mid-career to nearby school districts because there was sort of a trough over in the salary structure. It was good at the beginning and at the end, and in the middle it was not good. And so we went over and got agreement from the district about restructuring that. That is still being implemented. The only reason it's being implemented now is because the district refused to implement it, and we had to go over and take it to arbitration. They tried to get out of that by going over to Superior Court to get out of the agreement, which was ridiculous, and the Superior Court agreed with that and kicked it back to arbitration. And now it's mostly a question of, can they competently calculate the back pay that's now owed to us, and they're promising that by late fall, which would mean 2 years after the agreement was originally agreed to. So you could see they've got a really good history of following through an agreement. So of course we're excited to go over and sit down at the table and have another agreement with them that they will continue not to follow. Number three, the third part of that salary structure redo wasn't so much. It had a larger purpose, which was retaining teachers. But there's also another concern, and that's retaining teachers and families. And so the third part of the agreement that we had done was to try and get some class size reduction, because we have some of the larger class sizes in the area. And that's another thing that helps get and retain teachers and get and retain families in the district. And we felt that we were not comparable to other districts that way. But we also understood that with all the changes to the salary structure, there wasn't a lot of money left over for that. Keep in mind, though, that our district gets more in ADA because we have a higher number of students who are in poverty, students who are English language learners, foster youth students, etc. And so the state gives more money for going over and educating those students. Okay. So let's go back to this. What we decided to do was to take a look at our health care, because that is explicitly written in our contract that we are to have health care through HealthNet. The district tried to change that a couple years ago and had to go over and reverse what it did because it wasn't legal. And that came from the last bit of labor antagonism that led to a strike about 20 years ago. And at that particular time, in that particular place, the teachers wanted stability in their health care, and they went over and bargained, ended up not getting COLAs and salary increases for about a decade, is what's been quoted to me, because they wanted to maintain that the district would pay 100% of health care costs. So we were willing to go over and look at that and say that we would go to a comparable healthcare plan, and the thinking was that we could probably get in something like PERS, and it would be fairly comparable to what we have now, and would result in savings because it's a larger pool of people. It's not just the district teachers. And then take that savings and use it only for paying for class size reduction. The disagreement that the district has, even though they signed an agreement saying that it would go for class size reduction, is they need the money somewhere else. They're very vague about where it will be spent. They complain that they don't have enough money to spend on equity programs, although class size reduction is an equity program, and certainly we could have rolled out the implementation over in a way that would go over and help schools that were in the most need first. Certainly that's how we've done some of our class size reduction work over implementing of class size reduction in the past. So basically, they don't want to have their hands tied about where that money goes, but they don't have a choice about it. That's what they agreed to. They signed the agreement. They approved the agreement. That is the agreement, okay? That is our collective bargaining agreement, and they are not following it. And so if you look here in this note, the first thing, one of the things he's saying over in the beginning is, despite districts' efforts to begin negotiation, SCTA leaders have repeatedly stated that negotiations will not be productive until a number of outstanding issues related to the collective bargaining agreement, what we call a CBA, are resolved. To the extent that there are lingering issues with the 2017 agreement, neither of those issues nor outstanding issues stands in the way of parties beginning successor contract negotiations. Okay, let's see what they want to talk about, because if they weren't going to go over and talk about class size over in the successor agreement, sure. If they weren't going to talk about health care, sure, because that's still out there as an outstanding issue, is health care savings, and class size reduction. Let's look and see what they want to go over and talk about. Article 13, health benefits. Sacramento City Unified School District is the only large urban district in the region. Well, we are the only large urban district in the region, frankly, because we've got a higher number of kids in poverty than they do in Natomas and Elk Grove. I don't know, this makes no sense. That pays full premium 100% for a Health Net family plan at an annual cost of approximately $31,492 per year, blah, 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 blah. This isn't comparable. You can't, we need to do something about these costs. Okay, so basically this is like you go over to a car dealership, you bring your existing car, and you say, I want to get a new car. I'm willing to go over and trade in. I'm really not crazy about doing this, because who enjoys going over and dealing with a car dealership? What are you going to give me for the car I have, and how much will that apply towards the new car? And, basically it's like, let's talk about your trade-in value later. But I want to go over and talk to you right now about this new car that you want to buy. And, that's not like, you got to get that settled about what your trade-in value is, right? Before you're going on to buying the new car. And that's kind of, it's a baity switchy thing that's going on here. And it's not going to wash, because they basically want us to start negotiating away some of our benefits. But it's not going to be the same benefit. We're not going to be, if they were following it, we would not be in this Health Net plan that costs so much. We'd be over in a PERS plan that costs a lot less. So it doesn't make a bit of sense to go over and start negotiating health benefits with them at this point until we get it implemented. But they seem to feel that that's no big deal. And that's where the sticking point is. Okay, one of the things that likes to talk about is how much our benefits and salary costs are. And they'll say 91% of every dollar goes to employee salary and benefits. They do some funny math to go over and come up with that, because basically they look at salary and benefits as a percentage of unrestricted funds. And what unrestricted funds is sort of a fungible thing as well. and um, Sacramento City Teachers Association has already shown that actually 91% is lower than when you look at other large districts nearby. They're more like at 93. So there's no sense in what they're saying with that. But I wanted to go over and actually take a look at what it really looks like, because they are saying over in that other letter that I showed you that there's this that one of the comparative disadvantages that they have is that they're spending more over on benefits for us. So what I did is I went to EdData, and that's where they crunch a bunch of numbers together that they get from CDE, or California Department of Education, data that's submitted by each of the districts. And so I'm going to look at it as just general funds, because that makes a lot more sense. What does your big budget picture look like? And going over and looking at salaries. And so this orange here on top is certificated salaries. This pinkish one here is classified, and then this is employee benefits right below. And you can see our green is bigger than over here in Elk Grove. But when you look at this, here's the scale. This is 80 and this is 90. I'm going to try and size it up a little bit to go over and let you see more. So we could go over and see in the last year's data they have, which is the 2018 data, and they're probably going to start posting the 18-19 data pretty soon. You can see here's 80% and 90% and 80% and 90%, Sacramento City Unified, Elk Grove. And lo and behold, you look over at salary and benefits, and when you go over and you compare them, our green's bigger over for benefits, but you look over at the salary and it's like it's higher. The certificated salary expenditure over in Elk Grove, and it's above 85% over in there when you look at the scale, and it's below 85% when you go over and look at Sacramento City Unified School District. And so it looks like we're actually spending less. It's probably gone up now that they're finally implementing some of our salary changes. But we were willing to go over and get some savings over there so that we could have class sizes that were more comparable to here. It's not like we're saying, hey, we're not going to save you money. It's just we want to know where that money is going. And it's not just that we want to know, it's we have an agreement that that money is to go to class size reduction. And that's not negotiable at this point. We spent almost 2 years getting that contract negotiated. And we're not going to go over and start giving that away. Anyway, so that's what's at stake. It's basically they need to go over and agree to abide by the existing agreement, start working towards that, and then we can go over and talk about things going forward. But a quick note on where they could save money. When they got themselves into a whole lot of budget mess this spring and were running around like chickens with their heads cut off, they did a bunch of cuts over at Cerna. I'm not saying that those were wise cuts. They seem to be concentrating on doing cuts to positions that had a lot of interaction with the public and with the community, which seemed kind of premeditated to me. But certainly there are cuts that they can make over at Cerna, and I will note that when things started easing up fiscally and financially on them, when they started discovering all this money that they had missed, before they went over and rescinded the layoff notices to teachers, and they still haven't rescinded a lot of the layoff notices to the classified staff, the first jobs they brought back were those administrative positions over at Cerna. And that shows what their priorities are. There are cuts certainly that could be made over the back end business end of things. Certainly they haven't been well served by that particular area that they could look at to go over and get their budget in line. But going over and scraping off healthcare savings to do that, not going to happen.